Okay, so hi all, welcome back to the 10th week of TA live sessions for artificial intelligence knowledge representation and reasoning. And yeah, like I had announced in the previous live session that just for this week we'll be starting a bit earlier. So we started around 5:14, which is a bit earlier to our usual time of 6, but that's okay. And yeah, today we'll be discussing some questions from week 10 of the course. And so most of the questions today will be recall based questions, and so they should be something that is taken straight from the lecture slides and maybe a little bit of conceptual questions. And so, yeah, so essentially the point is that week 10 should be one of the weeks that's easier to solve in the assignments as well as in the main exam, and hence its scoring. So yeah, I would also encourage you all to study this particular week well and score as much as you can in the assignments as well as in the main exam. So another clarification, even though we are starting early, this whole session is going to be recorded and made available on YouTube like all other live sessions. So even if you're not able to attend this in person, that's fine, you can revisit the recordings later on. Okay, so yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. And here is the first question for today. So today the questions will be based on conceptual dependency theory, or CD. Okay, so this is the first question. A conceptualization in CD theory is which of the following? Okay, and the options are: the process of devising a plan for a goal, the equivalent of a well-formed formula in a formal logic, a description of a basic event or action, and a description of a state in the domain. Okay, so I'll wait for maybe a minute or two and you can think about it, and then we can discuss the solutions. Okay, so the correct answer in this case would be B, C and D, right? Because if we go through the options one by one, we will see that the process of devising a plan for a goal is not something that is relevant to the conceptualization in a CD theory, right? On the other hand, CD theory is concerned with conceptualization being the equivalent of a well-formed formula in formal logic, right? As we saw in the lecture slides as well. It can also involve a description of a basic event or an action, and it can also be a description of a state in the domain. Okay, so yeah, this is an example of a straight recall based question, and the correct answers in this case are B, C and D. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, which of the following hold for the conceptual dependency theory? Okay, and you have five options in front of you. The first option is every verb in English language is a conceptual action. The second option is that nominals stand for objects and people. Actions are acts done by nominals. Dependency in CD refers to dependence on English grammar, and a Tamil sentence can be mapped to CD theory. Okay, so these are your five options, and again this is also an example of slight recall and slight conceptual based question, So yeah, I'll give you a couple of minutes and then we can discuss the solution. Yeah, hi, good evening Ritu. Thanks for joining. Can you confirm if I'm audible and is my screen visible? Okay, that's great. So we have just started with the session and this is only the second question. So you can have a look at the question and think about the answers. We'll just discuss the solution in maybe a minute or so. Okay, so any guesses for what the right answer could be? Okay, let's go over the options one by one and maybe that will help. So the first option says that every verb in English language is a conceptual action. But if you remember the slides talked about these two particular verbs like love or hate. These are not exactly actions, instead they are states in the CD theory, right? So we know that not all verbs in the English language are actions. So we know that the first option is incorrect in that case, right? Let's talk about the second option, which is nominal stands for objects and people. Okay, and this makes sense if we go back to the lecture slides again, the very first lecture slide. Yeah, there we go. So nominals and actions can exist as independent notions, and nominals stand for objects and people, whereas actions are acts of nominals. Okay, so based on this particular lecture slide alone, we can say that nominal stands for objects and people is a correct option, and so is actions are acts done by nominals. What about option D? Dependency in CD refers to dependence on English grammar. So what do you think? Will this always be true? It won't, right? So dependency in CD does not always depend on the English grammar, and so this option is also false, whereas the last option is correct because a Tamil sentence can be mapped to CD theory. In fact, any language can be mapped to CD theory. Okay, so the correct options in this case are B, C and E. Okay. Yeah, I just saw your message in the chat box. Thanks for your answer. Yeah, I hope there are no doubts in this question. If not, we can move on to the next question, but if there are any doubts, please feel free to let me know. Okay, so the third question deals with this program called Marchi that processed a natural language sentence. It was essentially a program to understand the natural language in a certain way, and this question gives us 4 options that talk about the Marchi program, and we have to select which of these are true. So the program Marchi processed a natural language sentence by doing which of the following. So again, this is also an example of a recall based questions, and like I said before, in the beginning of the session, most of the questions from this week are going to be recall based. There will be very few conceptual questions, so it's a very scoring area. If you read the slides well, you'll be able to answer most of the questions. Okay, so there's one vote for options A and B. What about option C? Could this particular program involve making inferences commonly associated with the concepts involved? Okay, so here is the reference of Marchi from the lecture slides. It would make inferences based on the meaning of the input sentence using Reacher's inferencing program. Okay, so I might be mispronouncing the name of the scientist, but yeah, essentially the key points to focus here are that it would make inferences. Okay, it based itself on the meaning of the input sentence, which means that it dealt with the semantics, and it used the inferencing program developed by Rieger. Okay, so coming back to the options that we had, constructing a syntactic parse tree of the input sentence, this is correct. Identifying the concepts involved in the semantic representation, semantic meaning related to the meaning of the sentence, that is also correct. And then making inferences commonly associated with the concept involved, this is also correct. So the only incorrect option in this case is the last option, which is exploiting its common sense knowledge about the domain. Okay, so Marchi doesn't deal with the common sense knowledge about the domain, it is concerned with the first 3 options. Okay, any doubts there, or should we move on to the next one? Okay, that's great then. Let's move on to the fourth question for today, which is again about a program, but here we are concerned with a particular conceptualization, and the question asks, a program constructing a conceptualization using 8 runs will refer to or will be relevant for which of the following 4 options. Okay, so again I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it, and yeah, this is also a straight recall based question from the slides, so yeah, you can think about it for a minute and then we can discuss the solution. Okay, so there's one vote for options B and D each. Okay, so let's dissect the question step by step. Okay, so the question asked us about this thing called a trans, right, where trans refers to transfer of something. So just by this particular small observation that this involves a transfer of something, there must be a giver and there must be a receiver, right? So with that we can say that option B is, or the second option is definitely correct. Okay, it involves the identification of the giver and the recipient. Okay, so option B is definitely true. Now we have to consider the rest of the three options. Okay, let's consider the first option, option A. Because we know that there is a transfer happening of some object from a giver to a receiver, we know that the object will have a new owner after the transfer has been completed, right? Let's say we are giving a pencil to a friend. Okay, so the pencil, friend 1 is the giver and the pencil is being given to friend 2 who is the receiver. Okay, so after the transfer is completed, friend 2 is the new owner of the pencil, right? So by this logic, option A is also correct, right? So this will also infer that the object has a new owner. Now let's talk about options C and D. Okay, now the second small observation to notice in this question is that we have an A trans, okay, not a P trans. What does this A and P refer to? So A refers to an abstract transfer, transfer of an abstract concept or an abstract entity, whereas P trans refers to a transfer of a physical object. Okay, because this refers to an A trans and not a P trans, we cannot say that the object has been physically transferred, right? And hence option C is incorrect. Okay, about option D, infer that both the recipient and giver now possess the object. This is also incorrect because we know that there was a transfer of the object from a giver to a receiver, right? So only one of them can have the object at the end of the transfer, right? Both of them cannot possess the object. So the correct options in this case would be A and B. Okay, any doubts in this question? Okay, that's great. Then let's move on to the fifth question for today, which refers to an action called mbuild. Okay, so the cd action mbuild, and we have to choose the option that will be correct in this case. Okay, so again I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it and then we can discuss the solution. Okay, and as a hint I'll just show this particular slide to you. Okay, and now back to the question. So yeah, please feel free to write your answers in the chat box and then we can discuss the solution. Okay, so another hint, only one of these options is correct. Okay, so here we have only one of A, B, C and D which is the correct option. Okay, Okay, so let's go back to the information that was given in the slides. Okay, so here it said that mbuild, this cd action, represents the construction by an animal or an actor, you can say, or a nominal, of new information from old information. Okay, so this includes examples like decide something or conclude something or imagine something or consider something, right? But none of these really involved a causal relationship between two entities, right? So causal relationship is when a particular entity is causing a particular other entity, right? Here we are even hypothesizing, right? We are even considering actions like imagine or consider, right, which are not exactly causal. These are just hypothesizing, or us making assumptions in some sense, right? So because of that reason, the first option would be incorrect. Yeah, it cannot be used to identify a causal build-up in the story. What we can use it for is to represent an actor making an inference, right? So we can use some existing information that we have and then use that to make some inferences. That inferences may be true inferences, in which case it would be conclusions, right? It can be some hypothesis or something, some assumptions that we are making based on some knowledge that we have. That could be our imagination, right? So option B seems to be correct. Okay, option C doesn't make sense. It is not the process of building a make file for the story. This option itself doesn't make sense, and obviously the last option is also incorrect. So the only correct option in this case is option B. Okay, any doubts in this question? Okay, if not, then that's great. Let's move on to the next question for today. So now we are given an English sentence. Okay, we are given this particular sentence that says Neha bought an ice cream and ate it. Okay, and now we have to decide what would be the correct conceptual dependency representation of this English sentence. Okay, and these are some 6 options given to us, and we have to decide which of these would be true for the correct CD representation of this English sentence. Okay, so yeah, again a hint where you can base your answer solely on the English language sentence that is given to you over here. Okay, and yeah, I'll let you think about it for maybe a minute or two, and then we can discuss the solutions. Hi Vignesh, welcome to the session. So we were just in the middle of the session. Like I said before, we started a bit early today, but yeah, we are at the 6th question, and Yeah, the current question tells us that we have a English sentence which is highlighted in the shared screen over here, and we have to select which of these options would be true for the correct conceptual dependency representation of this English sentence. Okay, so yeah, you can also join us and think about the correct options, and then we can discuss the solutions. And yeah, again, re-emphasizing that this session is also being recorded and will be made available like all other sessions, so it's okay if some of your colleagues are not able to join today. Okay, so we have one answer in the chat box, or a couple of answers. So yeah, so like I was saying earlier about the hint that I gave, we can base the solution solely or only on the English sentence that is given to us, right? And what the sentence tells us is that this person called Sneha bought an ice cream and ate it, right? So we are given no information about how she bought the ice cream, or did she use cash, did she use online transaction or a card or a mobile based UPI or something. We are not given any such information, right? So because we are not given any such information, we can get rid of options B, C and D, right? We know that options B, C and D would be incorrect in this case. Now let's look at the other options. Okay, so the first option is that this would involve the use of A trans. Okay, and if I go back to the lecture slides once more, so A trans involves the transfer of an abstract relationship such as a possession, ownership or control. Okay, and examples are give, take and buy. So buy is an example of A trans, right? So we are buying something from another person. So because A trans involves this particular action of relationship of buying, we can say that the first option is also correct. So the CD representation of this sentence would involve the use of A trans. Okay, so A is correct. Now let's look at option E. Would normally imply the use of P trans of the ice cream. Okay, so P trans refers to the physical transfer of something, right? Not just an abstract relationship that is being talked about. Now when a person buys or eats an ice cream, there would be a transfer of the physical object, ice cream, from the hand of the person to the mouth of the person, right? Because that is involved in the act of eating something. So because of that, the E option will also be correct. It would imply the use of P trans of the ice cream. Also, because there is an act of eating involved over here, the ingest option will also be true. It would involve the use of ingest by Sneha, because once Sneha eats the ice cream, she would be ingesting it. Okay, so the correct options in this case would be A, E and F. Any doubts in this question? Okay, that's great then. If this is clear, we can move on to the next question for today, which is question 7. And this also somehow relates to one of the questions we discussed early on in the session today. So this tells us that verbs like kill, hate, and love, um, can we say that these are acts in the conceptual dependency theory, or can they be represented by states or state changes in the CD theory, or do they involve a causal relation in CD theory, or they cannot be represented at all in CD theory? Okay, so you have to select the correct option or options from among these four options given to you. Okay, so again I'll let you think about it for a while and we can discuss the solution then. Okay, so we have a couple of answers in the chat box and let's go over the options one by one again. So like we discussed in the one of the earlier questions, um, these verbs like love and hate and kill, these are not really actions in the CD theory. These are rather states or state changes, right? So option A in that case would be incorrect and option B will be correct. Okay, so these verbs are represented by states or state changes in the CD theory, and they also involve a causal relation. Okay, they are directly linking or representing a causal relationship between an entity 1 and an entity 2. Okay, so option C will also be correct, whereas option D will be incorrect because we just saw that they can be represented by states or state changes, right? So the correct options in this case will be options B and C. Okay, this is also again um, directly from the lecture slides. Let me just show it to you once more. Okay, so here we have one slide that says that love and hate are states rather than actions. Okay, so kill also belongs to one of these examples, where these are examples of English verbs that are states rather than actions. Okay, so why causal is correct? Because there is a causal relationship involved over here, right? When we say that a person A is linked to a person B by this relation called kill, we can directly say that person A killed person B, right? Or we can say person A hates person B or person A loves person B, right? There's a direct causal relation between the two people A and B. That's why we say that there is in these particular verbs involve a causal relation in CD theory. Okay, I think for further examples you can also refer to some of the examples given in the lecture slides. Okay, I'm trying to find some more examples. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so here you go. So for understanding whether it will be causal or not, you can refer to this particular slide. Okay, so John did something with the fertilizer, right? So this particular example, John did something with the fertilizer. Okay, so this is an example of a more informed listener, example where a more informed listener might create a more specific conceptual structure, right? So this would involve something like a causal connection. So instead of just saying that John did something with the fertilizer which caused the plants to be of a particular size, or increasing in the size of the plants, so this is an example of a direct cause of something, right? So John did something with the fertilizer, which is essentially he put something to the plants, which is the fertilizer, which caused the plants to increase in size. Okay, so this is an example of a causal connection. And similarly for these also, you see that there is a specific type of causal connection involved over here. Okay, so I hope that helps with the explanation. Yeah, so that is incorrect because like we saw in the slides, right, these are states in a causal dependency theory, sorry, conceptual dependency theory, not really actions, uh, as is mentioned in the slides over here. Okay, so this represents a particular state rather than an action, right? um, yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. uh, Maybe you can revisit the lecture videos, and maybe professor would have given some further explanation into why exactly these are states. Okay, okay, that's great. Then let's move on to the next question for today. um, okay, so now we are talking about verbs like remember and forget. Okay, so now I think this will also help you understand why the previous verbs that we saw, like love, hate and kill, are states and not actions. Okay, so here we are talking about remember and forget, and we have to choose which of the options are correct in this case. Okay, so let's go to the lecture slides once more and look at remember. Okay, so this is an example of M-trans. Okay, what is M-trans? M-trans is a transfer of mental information between animals or actors within an animal. Okay, so when you are remembering something or someone, you are remembering the mental information or the memory of that particular thing or person that you already had in your mind, right? So this is an example of M-trans, or transfer of mental information, which is what is represented by M over here. And because you are transferring information from one part of your memory to another part, it's called M-trans, right? So coming back to the options over here, it refers to the movement of information in between different compartments in the memory models. So this is true. Does it require the use of p-trans? No, because we are not physically transferring anything, we are just transferring mental information. So instead of p-trans, it requires the use of m-trans. Okay, and option D is also incorrect because it does not involve the deleting of information from one location. We are just transferring information from one location to another, right? So the correct options are options A and C. Okay, any doubts in the eighth question? Okay, if not, then that's great. Let's move on to the ninth question for today. Okay, so the ninth question again gives us a particular sentence, that is Luke walked into a bar. Okay, so Luke is a person who walked into a bar. So which of the following options can we say uh, are something that we can expect just based on this particular sentence that is given to us? Okay, so this is an example of something that we are hypothesizing based on some information that is given to us. Okay, we are imagining. Okay, so given Luke walked into a bar, which of the following can be said to be expected given our assumption on what people do when they walk into a bar? Okay, and what is a bar, and the fact that Luke refers to the name of a person or a human being. Okay, so based on this information that we have just by looking at this sentence, which of the following options can we expect? Hi Varun, welcome to the meeting. So yeah, we are at the ninth question currently. We started a bit early today, like I had mentioned in the previous live session, but yeah, um, you can join in from this particular question, and the previous questions, like I had said before, will always be made available, so you can refer back to them anytime. So yeah, like I said, this question gives us a sentence and we have to select which of these options can we expect based on the meaning of the sentence that is usually stereotypically associated with uh, the words involved in this sentence. Okay, so which of these options do you think would be correct? Okay, any guesses? Okay, so we have a couple of answers in the chat box, and let's see which of these options are correct one by one. Okay, um, so the first option says that Luke wants a drink. Okay, okay, this is something natural that we can expect. If a person goes into a bar, then we can expect that he or she will want a drink, right? So option A seems to be correct. Or Luke might want to just eat something. Okay, so option B is also correct. It can also be possible that Luke lives near a bar, because we have said that Luke walked into a bar and not something like Luke drove to a bar or Luke cycled to a bar, right? So because Luke is involved in the action of walking, we can say that, or we can expect that Luke lives near a bar. Okay, whereas the last option is something that we cannot expect. Luke is not a human, is not something that we can expect based on just this sentence that is given to us, because that would not make any sense, right? And that would also not be stereotypically associated with this particular piece of information that is given to us. Usually non-human people don't walk into a bar, right? So the correct options in this case would be A, B and C. Okay, any doubts in this question? Hi Balaji, welcome to the session. Right, so like I had announced in the previous live session, that just for this week we were starting a bit early. We started around 5:15, and yeah, we discussed a couple of questions, but yeah, it's not an issue, because all these questions, yeah, it's everything is recorded, so yeah, it'll all be made available in time to you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so currently we are at the ninth question. And yeah, I hope this is clear. Any doubts in this question? Okay, if not, then that's great. So this is a question that told us or gave an example of what can we expect based on a particular piece of information given to us. Okay, now when we add some more information to our knowledge base, like instead of Luke walked into a bar, if we had an additional sentence, could we infer or expect some more things? Okay, so that is what the next question deals with. So I'll move on to the next question for today. Right, so the next question tells us that in addition to the fact that Luke walked into a bar, we are given that the bar is in a galaxy far, far away. Okay, so for some of you that might be familiar with this common quotation from the Star Wars movies, they would understand why this is the case and why some of the options over here. So, yeah, just to add to the fun element of the question. So based on these two sentences that are given to you, Luke walked into a bar and the bar is in a galaxy far, far away. Now which all of these options do you think we can expect based on these two pieces of information given to us? Of course, these options that we found to be true in the previous question will remain to be true, which is Luke wants a drink, or Luke wants to eat something, or Luke lives near a bar. But will the fourth and the fifth options be something that we can expect because of this additional piece of information given to us? What do you think? We can, right? Exactly. D could be correct. That's right, Smara. So, because in the previous question we were only told that Luke walks into a bar, we could not make any inferences or any expectations or any hypothesis about Luke being a human or a non-human. But now that we are given this additional information that the bar is in a galaxy far, far away, there is a possibility that Luke is a alien. Okay. Again, this is all hypothetical question. Okay, just for the sake of understanding of this concept of stereotypical knowledge associated with a particular piece of information. Okay, so now that we know that the bar is in a galaxy far, far away, another one expectation could be that Luke is not a human, or that Luke is a Jedi Master, which is also something related to aliens from Star Wars. Okay, so the correct options in this case would be all of them: A, B, C, D, and E. Any doubts on this question? Okay, if not, then that's great. So yeah, these were mostly some of the questions that I wanted to discuss from week 10. So again, I will reiterate what I said at the beginning of the session today, that most of the questions from week 10 would be recall based questions, or very simple questions that are straight from some particular element in the slides. Okay, and there will be very few questions that will be based on some concepts in the or some conceptual kind of questions from week 10, right? So I would highly encourage that you read each and every part of the slide, especially in week 10 in detail, because if you do that, you will be very well prepared to answer all the questions in the assignment as well as in the main exam. Okay, and some of those questions we discussed today in the session, and I can also give a quick review or quick overview of the kind of questions we did today for the people who joined in a bit later. But before doing that, I want to give a brief demonstration of these two particular programs called ELISA and ChatGPT. Okay, so because week 10 dealt with some of these programs that involved the concept of or the domain of natural language understanding, okay, or different programs to understand a natural language like English. Okay, so ChatGPT is something that I think most of you might have heard of, if not used already. Have you? Can people tell me if they have heard about or used ChatGPT already? Okay, that's great then. So this is one of the recent big developments in the field of AI in the past couple of years. And ELISA, on the other hand, is a very primitive program that I would give you a demonstration of just now. So if you check out the Wikipedia page of ELISA, okay, so first of all, how many of you have heard about ELISA before? No? Okay, no worries. Now you will know. So ELISA is an early natural language processing program that was developed in around 1960s, okay, by this researcher at MIT called Joseph Weizenbaum. Okay, so you can check out his profile as well. And this is essentially it's a very basic Rogerian psychotherapist chatbot. Okay, so it essentially is a chatbot, as in it gives you a particular text, you reply to that text, and then again it replies to that text, and the conversation proceeds in that manner. But what the flaw of ELISA is that it is based on a very primitive and a very simple pattern matching based approach. Okay, it knows certain patterns in the English sentence, and when you give it a certain input or a certain sentence, it matches that with the knowledge that it has, and then it replies based on that. And so you cannot have very meaningful or very deep conversation with this particular chatbot. Okay, so here is an example that I had typed in over here for demonstration purposes. So I had asked this particular chatbot, okay, let me ask it again. Do you think CSK, which you might know is a cricket team from the IPL, will win today? Okay, so you see how it kind of deflected, because ELISA is not aware of what CSK is. CSK didn't even exist when this particular program was formed, right? So it kind of tried to deflect the answer. Okay, we were discussing you, not me. Okay, it gave some random reply. So if we even ask something that is difficult for us humans to answer, right? So if we ask something like, how was the universe created? So you see, it didn't give an answer, it tried to deflect it by asking a question as an in response. If I continue to pressurize it, it'll again try to deflect. See, it again tried to deflect it, right? So if you keep testing these different kinds of options again and again, you'll see that this is not really a very helpful chatbot. Whereas in case of ChatGPT, it is something called so GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer. Okay, and it's a huge machine learning model that has been trained on a large amount of data, and if you ask something to it, it will give you a more meaningful response than what we are getting from ELISA. That doesn't mean that it is something that can be said to be as good as a human. Okay, maybe for some specific task ChatGPT is as good as a human or better than human, but it cannot be said to be equal to a human being, right? So there are flaws with ChatGPT, but it has progressed much more in the domain of natural language understanding than we were at the point when ELISA was developed. So I just wanted to give you this small demonstration for you to explore on your own when you have some free time. Okay, and now coming back to the slides. So yeah, this is what I had for this week today, and I'll just give you a brief overview of the kind of questions we discussed today. So we started with things like what is a conceptualization in a CD theory? Okay, so it is equivalent of a well-formed formula. It describes an event or an action, or it can describe a state in the domain. Okay, which of the following hold true for the CD theory? So we saw that it deals with nominals that stand for objects and people. It stands for actions that are acts done by nominals, and we saw that any sentence, not just Tamil, but any sentence in any language can be mapped to CD theory. Okay, then we discussed a question about this particular program called Margie that was built for the purpose of natural language understanding, and we discussed some of the options that were associated with how exactly Margie worked, and this again is based directly on the particular piece of information given about Margie in the slides, so you can check it out. We discussed what these different conceptualizations like A trans and P trans are. So we discussed a question about A trans, we discussed a question about M build, we discussed a question about having an English sentence and then looking at the conceptual dependency representation of that particular sentence. Okay, so these are some of the type of questions that we discussed today. Alright, so that brings us to an end of the questions from today from my side. Is there something that you would like me to discuss before we close the session today? So again, reiterating the fact that I have mentioned before in the session today, that although we started a bit early, this has been recorded and it will be made available soon to you, so you don't have to worry if you missed some of the questions. All the explanations will be made available in the recording. Okay. Okay. Anything that you would like me to discuss? Or share. You can share your general feedback about the live sessions as well. We are nearing the end of the live session, so this was week 10. We have 2 more weeks left, and if I recall correctly, I think we are going to have an additional session, a general session after the 12 weeks are done, where you can feel free to discuss any doubts from all the weeks from 1 to 12. Okay, so we'll be having that additional session as well. I'm not sure if the NPTEL team has announced it yet, but if not, they will soon, so you can have that in mind as well. There will be an additional session where you can discuss any doubts from all the 12 weeks. No, Smarak. Next week we will have the live session at its normal time, 6 to 8. Okay. This change was only for this particular week because I need to travel to an today evening somewhere urgently, right? So just for this week, we are having the session earlier. Okay, so if there is no other thing that we have to discuss, then maybe we can close the session and meet next week again. Remember, next week same day, Tuesday, and 6 o'clock is when we'll start. Okay then, see you all next week.